Thank you so much for attending this session, and I'm very happy to be here in Malaysia again. And this is my very first time in Ipoh. Actually, this is probably the first time that I am in a city other than Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and I'm very, very excited to be here and to share with you some of the exciting things that are happening in the educational landscape. Keith had already done a very great introduction on 21st century learning. And what I'll do in the following sessions is kind of try to expand on what Keith has already explained to you. And I think Keith was more onto the level of primary, basic education stuff. I'll try to take it to a little bit higher level for, say, high school or secondary school level and see what kind of library resources we can provide for you that your teachers and faculty can make use in your classroom settings. And I titled this presentation, "The Teacher Doesn't Know the Answer." You know, traditionally in 20th century or 19th century learning models, the teacher is supposed to be the all-knowing head of the classroom. You know, all the information came from the teacher in one direction, basically, right? And the teacher had the knowledge and pass it on to the students, and the students are supposed to just memorize and try to take in as much as they can. That has been really, really changing in recent years with the 21st century model. Firstly, let me just briefly introduce my company. I come from a publisher called Cengage Learning. You may have heard about us in the ELT division, but I belong to a different division which is called GALE, which is more about library resources. So we publish things like encyclopedias, ebooks, journal databases, subject-specific databases, and even things like historical archives, which I will touch on a little bit in my material. So, 21st century skills. This is a really often quoted definition of 21st century skills by the OECD Education Director, Andres Schleider. And I highlighted some words in what he says. He talks about a fast-changing world, because of rapid economic and social change. So one of the driving elements behind this whole concept of the 21st century skill or learning model is that the world is changing so rapidly. When I was growing up, maybe you could learn how to fix a television, for example, and make your whole life, earn your whole life fixing televisions. You know, the televisions might change a little bit, but the basic skills will be there. Today, can you do that? We might not even have televisions, when your kids grow up. We might have totally different devices and totally different technologies. So how do you prepare your children for something that hasn't even come yet? Okay? So that's the whole idea about 21st century skills. And it is about, in many ways, coping with this really rapid change. Change becomes a key word. And change often creates controversy. How many of you have seen this before? See this? Yeah, this has been quite viral, hasn't it? Yeah. So, Abercrombie and Fitch, very famous manufacturer of clothes, the owner of that company did a very controversial interview in which he said things like, well, basically, unattractive people like me, or overweight people like somebody else, or other undesirable teens don't have to shop at Abercrombie because we don't cater to those people. They can shop elsewhere. And are we exclusionary? He said, absolutely. And this lady kind of reacted to this, and she did this ad spoof of Abercrombie and Fitch and saying that attractive and fat is another way to go. So this is a little controversy. And what we try to do in 21st century learning is we take these current controversies, and these are, controversies that can be interpreted in many, many different ways. People have many differing opinions, and there are many shades in between. And we try to do discussions. So we think in 21st century learning platforms that controversies like these are great opportunities for learning. And learning what? Not learning facts about Abercrombie and Fitch, but actually learning how to think, how to interpret controversies, how to express your own opinions about a controversy not in a really subjective way, but in a more persuasive and logical way, so you can communicate with other people and persuade other people to agree with you. So, in 21st century learning, we take controversial issue assignments, and we know that these can increase critical thinking skills and appreciation of our cultural diversity. Diversity is another 21st century keyword. And a lot of people agree with that. 93% of higher education faculty believe that critical thinking is an essential learning outcome. Not only do the faculty believe so, employers are increasingly becoming wary of students who come into the workplace armed with lots of facts and technical skills, but can't really think. They can't solve problems. They can't tackle new situations because they weren't trained to think critically. So employers actually value critical thinking skills over job candidates. And studying and debating controversial topics in school helps increase student attention. This has been proven in many settings because it's very boring when you're listening to the all-knowing teacher preaching you facts, looking down on you. I know everything, so you have to learn from me. That's kind of boring, isn't it? But when you're actually facing a teacher who's taking up a controversial topic, like say animal experimentation, is it okay to inject genes in a mouse and experiment what happens to his brain when you change some of the cells in his brain? Is that okay? And some people might say, well, that's horrible. But other people might say, well, yeah, it is kind of horrible, but for the advancement of science, for the advancement of knowledge, it might be necessary. And there's no correct answer to that kind of thing. And when the students understand that, hey, even the teacher doesn't know the correct answer because there is no correct answer, they suddenly become really attentive because it becomes their own problem. It's not someone else's problem. So that's the whole thing about introducing controversy. Students who debate controversial issues in school are more likely to be engaged and active citizens when they grow up as well. But, well, that's easier said than done, isn't it? How do you actually implement that into your classroom setting? This is an interesting paper that was published by The Economist Intelligence Unit. And this education master of the Tao Masters Academy says something interesting. I put critical thinking up there as one of the most important skills we should be teaching. But you can't just think critically without material to think about. So, how do you provide material to students that really stimulates their critical thinking skills, that are controversial, yet they can be controlled in a classroom environment? One way is say, okay, show them that Abercrombie and Fitch slide and say, okay, I'll give you 2 days to search whatever you can on the internet and find materials about that controversy and write something about it. So the first thing they'll do is just jump to Google, and they might search for Abercrombie and Fitch. They might even find a Wikipedia article describing that company. But is this all, is this actually really enough material for one thing? Could this be reliable material? For example, this Wikipedia article even says that a major contributor to this article appears to have a close connection with its subject. So maybe that guy who said that terrible thing might be writing this Wikipedia article, editing it. And how can you actually use that kind of material in a classroom setting? There are no boundaries, and the students won't be able to judge necessarily which materials are worthwhile looking into or worth reading. So this is why we created this 21st century skills platform that we call the Gale in Context line of products. We have several different modules, but by far the most popular worldwide is the one that we call Opposing Viewpoints in Context. So opposing viewpoints in context often tackles these controversial problems like cloning, child abuse, gun control, terrorism, censorship. These are all really controversial problems that don't have black or white or correct answers. And we put them in a really controlled environment with lots of material. So we have more than 14,000 pro or con viewpoint essays for many of these topics. We have overview essays, primary source documents like statistics and questionnaires, biographies, periodical articles, statistical tables, images. And if you look at the numbers, that might kind of sound really overwhelming. That's too much material, you might think. But the way we organize it makes it become really, really student-friendly. We didn't build this database to make it look like a database. We didn't make it like where you are asked to do a search and you get a whole list of many, many items in a search result. We changed it to make it look more like a Yahoo page, so to speak. So it doesn't overwhelm you with too much information. This is the entire homepage of one of the products, science, and context, or you can kind of pick and browse topics that interest you. And we have editors for these products, so they constantly tweak the material that is in the database. It's not just an automatic flow of material just automatically being ingested into the database. We have people who look into these pages and say, for the French Revolution page, is this the right image that we put here? Can we feature some articles on it over here? So we continue to improve and update this product dynamically. So if you go to the opposing viewpoints in context homepage, you can see some attractive images, you can see some selections of topics, and when you click on one of those topics, and this is a topic page, actually a recently built topic page on body image. So back to the Abercrombie issue. The whole issue is kind of centered around the question of body image. How do you perceive your own body? And there are many, many viewpoints and articles listed here, but they are always put into little buckets. So each of those types of materials, like viewpoints, reference, magazines, news, would only show the top 3 articles for each category. So you're not overwhelmed with too much information on the homepage, but you can click to view all. And the idea is students should be exposed to multiple types of material. If you just say search body image on Google, you might find a Wikipedia article on body image, you might find some organizations promoting body image, but you can't really tell how those materials differ and how you should use them differently. But in this database, we always separate, say, reference articles from magazine articles, news articles, because they all have different purposes and should be used and looked at in different ways. So for example, this is a viewpoint article, and a viewpoint article is a real opinion. This is a real life opinion written by a real person saying that the images of beauty are unrealistic and they hurt women. But we don't just quote this full opinion. Our editors provide an introductory paragraph giving the context of this opinion and the background of this author. And for the teachers, it already provides things like questions to consider while you're reading this opinion. And because this is an opposing viewpoint database, you may find slightly different angles on the same question of body image. So this person is saying standards of beauty are determined by evolutionary biology. So this person is saying that, well, standards of beauty are kind of universal because it's all a result of our evolution as a species that we came to, praise certain features in our faces, in our figures, and so forth. So that's another different angle, and you can take a look at this. Of course, there are other things like reading level icons. You can listen to the article. You have all the tools to print, email, and share these articles. And apart from those really opinionated viewpoint articles, we also have reference articles that give you a more neutral introduction. So what is the big picture? What is the whole picture that's happening around this controversy regarding body image? And this is a really nice written essay that gives you all the different shades and all the different standpoints without really giving a total conclusion to any of them. And you have statistics. If you're doing a debate class, you might want to quote this in your debates. You have news articles giving the latest findings in events around this. multimedia and all these images and videos. They are licensed for educational use, so you can use this in your classes or in your debate tournaments if you want to. And students, while they are reading these articles, they can actually make highlights or make notes to interesting passages that they might use later to form their own arguments. So you can highlight this particular sentence in yellow or add a note. And what do you do with that material? We have a very interesting way of doing it, which is tied into Google. A lot of students, I would say all students, almost all students have a Gmail account. And what they can do is they can log into the product with their Gmail and password. And once they do that, they can make all these highlights and notes and save all of those highlights and notes together with the entire document into their personal Google Drive, where they can share it with others through the Google Drive, so they can collaborate with their other students using Google technology. If your school already uses Google Classroom as a kind of LMS, the teacher can even create assignments using Google Classroom architecture directly from the product, so that it even manages to weave itself into the teacher's workflow a bit even better. And of course, these products are mobile compatible, so they can use it on an iPad or in an iPhone. Okay? Now, so far I've talked about opposing viewpoints in context, which kind of gives you all these different universal ethical and social issues. But another emphasis in the 21st century learning landscape is global skills or global understanding. And this was a very recent article that was published about the PISA tests. This is a kind of a test, annual test that is used and standardized across many countries that kind of compare how good Chinese students are in math compared to a student in San Francisco or something. And they are actually, from 2018, planning to include a different type of test that tests students' global skills. So you can see how the OECD is really pushing this 21st century learning program, and since it's going to be included in the PISA test, you can bet that your own government and your own MOE will be looking into this kind of thing very soon. So we also have a global issues and context database, where you can see all these different global issues, and you can often examine the same kinds of issues that you saw in the opposing viewpoints from a slightly different angle. So this is a page on international concepts of beauty taken from global issues and context. I won't go into the details, but it shows you some interesting things like Korean students who are looking for jobs. They want to look better in the interview, so they undergo plastic surgery. They even change their palm lines, because some people believe that the palm lines govern their destiny, so they would want to change their destiny and change the palm lines. Okay? So those are really different perceptions of beauty and yourself in different countries, and all of these are covered in global issues. We also have a very famous brand, the National Geographic, and we have the whole entire back file of the National Geographic magazine and many of their publications in this product, National Geographic Virtual Library. And this product can bring additional viewpoints, even more global viewpoints, and actually more visual viewpoints into similar topics like body image. For example, you can look at these Burmese ladies who put rings around their necks to make their necks longer, because in their society, long necks equals beauty. And you go back to the Abercrombie example, and you might debate with your students, so what does that mean? What does that mean when one society thinks that long necks are beautiful? And we're arguing in another society that concepts of beauty should be really different among individuals. I can be, overweight and beautiful at the same time. So how do you kind of, negotiate that difference? Or there might be people in other societies that have slightly different concepts of beauty. So how do we arrive at a kind of global consensus about what is beautiful in a body and what isn't? So that's another interesting debate. And global issues in National Geographic kind of expands the debate geographically. But another way to expand the debate is to go back in time and examine how these concepts changed over time. So we call those historical thinking skills, and those can be achieved by looking at things like historical newspapers. We have a whole database of the Times London newspaper, which you can search by any word on any page. And this can bring you something interesting. I did a search in the whole database using the phrase gain weight. Okay? And I found that in 1924, there were many ads that said, well, I can, thanks to Wingardus, which is a kind of wine, I understand, you can actually see how Wingardus is benefiting you by the way you rapidly increase in weight. And this, obviously, this ad is speaking to young ladies. Weigh yourself before taking Wingardus, and again, after taking it for a few days. Then note the extraordinary increase. Would you see an ad like this today? No. But in 1924, this was right after World War I, a lot of people were malnourished. So it was actually considered much beautiful if you had gained more weight. If you're skinny, it would just look very unhealthy. So you can see how these concepts of body image aren't universal across time. They even change in the same society. So that's another angle you can bring in to your classrooms using these primary source materials. So, to kind of wrap up, in global information age of the 21st century, just mastery of content alone, facts alone, is not enough. Students need to adopt and really increase their 21st century skills, which involve soft skills like critical thinking, global awareness, cultural and historical perspectives. And these are best nurtured through the introduction of controversial topics and multiple viewpoints into your classroom. And how do you do that? You can actually make use of many of our library databases. So we have opposing viewpoints and global issues, which are for the many current issues that we encounter today. And you have National Geographic Virtual Library, which brings a lot of rich images from a whole century worth of scientific journalism across the world. And then we have historical media coverage, for example, the Times Digital Archive, which brings 200 years worth of newspaper articles into your classroom through a very simple full-text search. Okay, makasih.